Hello and very warm welcome at Amish Shackle 5858. I am Amish Shackle. Following news have been reported by American, European, Asian, African, Australian news channels and the news agencies. So please let's go to the headlines.
Tonight, the dangerous record-breaking heat. 103 in Newark, 102 in Boston. Record set in New York City. Roads buckling. A woman discovered dead in her home. No power. 20 people hit by lightning, including a dozen children, and a lifeguard impaled on the beach. This record-breaking multi-day heat wave. More than 130 million Americans on alert again tonight. From Louisiana all the way up to New York, right into New England. The number of emergency room patients soaring. 20 people hit in a heat-fueled lightning strike. 12 of them children. And that woman dying, discovered after days without power. Tonight at the NATO summit with world leaders, President Trump pushing back on that preliminary intelligence report that said Iran's nuclear program was set back by only a few months after the U.S. strikes. What the president is now saying tonight, at the moment today when the NATO chief referred to President Trump as daddy. How the president responded. The mid-air scare, flames and smoke seen shooting from an American Airlines passenger jet. Booms heard on the ground. Flames shooting from an engine. 159 people on board. In New York City tonight, the political shocker in the Democratic primary for mayor. A 33-year-old self-described Democratic socialist, State Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani, defeating nearly a dozen candidates, including former Governor Andrew Cuomo. The reverberations tonight for the Democratic Party across the country are voters sending a message. And what the winner told our Rachel Scott about the issue of affordability in New York City and the country. Tonight, the home explosion, the injuries, including multiple firefighters, 10 fire departments rushing to the scene. The terrifying moment, the apartment fire, the woman forced to decide whether she would toss her baby from that window. Good Samaritans pleading with her. And late today, the news of an Amber Alert coming in for two missing children now, a brother and sister. Police believe they were taken by car. Their mother tonight pleading for their return. And the NBA draft tonight right here on ABC. All eyes on some rising stars, including the pride of Maine. From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David.
Okay, all right, Kelly, go ahead. Here we go. Here's another one.
Thank you very
We got them all today.
Okay. So, Mr. President, you talked about expecting some on-the-ground assessments at Fordo and other sites. Is that Israeli and U.S.?
It's been obliterated, Kelly. It's been
What is your message then, sir, to the intelligence community when they present reports? You're not disputing the DIA report. You're just...
They presented a report that wasn't finished. We're talking about something that took place 3 days ago.
I understand that, sir.
The report was done
assessment. So what is your...
Wait a minute.
Yes.
They didn't see it. All they can do is take a guess. Now, if you take a look at the pictures, if you take a look how it's all blackened, you know the fire and brimstone is all underground because it's granite and it's all underground. You don't show it. But even there, with all of that being said, the whole area for 75 yards around the hole where it hit is black with fire. The group that's run by this gentleman, in fact, you may want to talk about it for a second because we're going to issue a report. And I think it's not even a very exciting report at this point. It's been obliterated, totally obliterated. And they did a report, but it was like, if you look at the dates, it's just a few days after it
Understood,
happened.
sir.
So they didn't see it. They said it may be very severe.
Understood. Do you have a message for the intelligence community, though, in terms of unvarnished information get to you?
I don't really have a message. I would say issue the report when you know what happened. I wouldn't say that it could be severe, or maybe not to use the word severe. It could be severe. So before, what is it?
Not the public volunteer Zelensky meeting for a tactical reason with President Putin?
Let him answer.
Mr. Secretary.
These pilots, these refuelers, these fighters, these enders, the skill and the courage it took to go into enemy territory flying 36 hours on behalf of the American people and the world to take out a nuclear program is beyond what anyone in this audience can fathom. And the instinct of CNN Times is to try to find a way to spin it for their own political reasons, to try to hurt President Trump or
CBS News is inside Iran.
It's taken us about 15 hours to get here.
We're the first American broadcast network to report from Tehran since the U.S. strike.
And did the attack knock out Iran's nuclear program?
From CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News.
Good evening, I'm John Dickerson.
I'm Maurice Dubois.
President Trump is sticking to his assessment that U.S. strikes, in his word of choice, obliterated Iran's nuclear weapons program.
Other assessments are coming in to describe the extent of the damage. For now, there is no consensus. United Nations inspectors are hoping to visit the bomb facilities soon.
The president, at a NATO summit in the Netherlands, said that U.S. and Iranian officials will talk next week.
Our Imtiaz Tayeb arrived in Tehran today. We'll check in with him in just a moment.
But Ed O'Keefe is traveling with the president, and he leads off our coverage from the Netherlands. Ed?
John, we counted, and the President and Defense Secretary today used that term obliterated at least 8 times when describing the attacks on Iran's nuclear program. Initial intelligence assessments refute that claim, so other top administration officials today began releasing other intelligence reports that back up the President's views. The tenuous ceasefire still holds, and President Trump says he's still open to talking to Iran about their nuclear program.
We're going to talk to them next week with Iran. We may sign an agreement. I don't know. To me, I don't think it's that necessary.
That indifference follows weeks of pressure by Trump to seal an agreement. Now he thinks it's unnecessary because of the weekend strikes he called spectacular.
We blew it up. It's blown up. To kingdom come.
But that conclusion...
Tonight, President Trump on the world stage saying tonight the U.S. and Iran will meet. President Trump firing back about an early intel assessment of the U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear sites, arguing they had been obliterated, and why he says he does not need a nuclear agreement with Iran. R. Kelly O'Donnell questioning him in the heat of the NATO meetings, plus the lighter moment during a serious summit, why the head of NATO called President Trump Daddy. Fire in the sky, the frightening scene aboard an American Airlines jet as one of the engine sparks just after takeoff. The smoke and burst in the air, flames visible on the ground. What we're learning about the emergency landing tonight. 125 million people in the middle of this brutal heat wave, fire crews hosing down a bridge, too hot for traffic, when there will be any sense of relief. Political shocker, will this 33-year-old Democratic socialist be the next mayor of New York City? He just beat Andrew Cuomo and is poised to go head-to-head with the incumbent, Eric Adams. Risky rescue will take you underground as firefighters search for a little girl who fell into a storm drain during flash flooding. And the small town making a big difference in the lives of its graduates, helping pay their way to college. Nightly News starts right now. This is NBC Nightly News with Tom Yomans.
On this Wednesday night, Canada's commitment to double its defense budget over the next decade.
We can no longer rely on our geography to protect us.
What needs to be done to make this a reality and where the money will come from. Setback or total obliteration. The doubts about what's left of Iran's nuclear capability. A friend's selflessness and ultimate sacrifice.
We actually saved them.
The man hailed as a hero after last week's deadly rockslide in Alberta. Plus, who's your daddy?
Their daddy has sometimes too strong language.
Why is the head of NATO calling President Trump that?
National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with news of a big commitment to defense spending. Members of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, have agreed to substantially increase what they spend on security. All 32 countries are pledging to devote 5% of their economic output on defense by 2035. For Canada, that's roughly 150.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. A classified report by the Defense Intelligence Agency has concluded U.S. airstrikes on Iran ordered by President Trump failed to collapse Iran's nuclear facilities buried deep underground. That's according to 3 sources familiar with the report who say the Pentagon assessed Trump's attacks only set back Iran's nuclear program by months, rather than the total obliteration claimed by the president. Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio rejected the DIA's findings, but on Tuesday, the Trump administration canceled congressional intelligence briefings on the Iran attack, prompting frustration from both Republicans and Democrats. Illinois Democrat Mike Quigley told the Washington Post, quote, "They don't delay briefings that have good news," unquote. In Gaza, Al Jazeera reports at least 41 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli attacks since midnight, including more Palestinians targeted by Israeli forces while seeking food and humanitarian aid. This comes as Israel's issued new forced displacement orders for northern Gaza. Palestinians say there's no safe place left for them to go.
We're scared and terrified by these new and repeated Israeli.
I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amna Nabaz. On the NewsHour tonight, during a NATO summit, President Trump reveals new information that he says indicates the U.S. strike obliterated a key Iranian nuclear site.
An upset in New York City's Democratic mayoral primary with a young Democratic socialist defeating the state's former governor.
And Judy Woodruff visits a Texas border region where voters have dramatically shifted their partisan patterns.
Now the debate is not, hey, we have this problem, how do we solve the problem? Is, well, wait a minute, are you with them or with us?
Reports and analysis on Spain and Portugal. So join me here on France 24.
Sarah Morris, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on Daybreak. Our headlines this hour. At least 16 reported dead in anti-government protests in Kenya. Amnesty International says most of them were killed by police using excessive force, including live ammunition. The demonstrators were marking the anniversary of last year's deadly protests against a government tax bill. Israel sees one of its deadliest days in Gaza in months, with 7 of its soldiers killed. Meanwhile, 33 more Palestinians died while trying to access aid sites. Seeking food has become deadly in the enclave. We hear from some of the many desperate Gazans who continue to take the risk. And after months of pressure from Donald Trump, NATO members agreed to significantly boost their defense spending. They also reaffirmed their commitment to collective defense. The 2-day summit saw a major charm offensive from Secretary General Mark Rutte, who even referred to Trump as Daddy. We begin once again in
Plus, growing reports that the government is preparing to back down on welfare reform and face a major
problem with their pancreas. The government tells Sky News that discussions with Labours on welfare reforms will continue until the vote and beyond. Nearly 500 women raised concerns about maternity care they received at the Oxford University Hospitals Trust. We've got a special report on homes to transforming warfare. In the sport, England's under-21 set up a European Championship showdown with Germany after beating the Netherlands to reach the final. A very good morning to you. 10 people have died after.
All you have to do is nominate them at australianoverhere.org.au.
Today, US President Donald Trump claims a big win after NATO members agree to boost defense spending. While the CIA claims it has credible evidence that Iran's nuclear program was severely damaged by US strikes. Also had the sentencing hearing for the trio involved in the murder of Indigenous teen Cassius Turvey starts in WA. And a cold snap blankets parts of the country in snow with while ABC News as trials. NATO nations have agreed to increase spending to in the
biggest
issues you're invested in with on-the-ground reports and wall-to-wall coverage. But viewing it from a regional lens because we put Asia first.
This is Asia Now.
It's 12 p.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 9:30 in New Delhi, and 11 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Rani Samtani. At this hour, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung sounds the alarm, warning the economy is in a desperate situation. He urges Parliament to approve his extra budget proposal. Donald Trump announces nuclear talks with Iran next week as a ceasefire with Israel appears to hold. The U.S. president also pushing back at growing doubts over the extent of damage to Iran's nuclear sites. NATO leaders commit to an unprecedented defense spending hike to 5% of GDP by 2035 after months of pressure from President Trump. He calls it a big win for the West. Plus,
The World Economic Forum is wrapping up here in the Chinese port city of Tianjin with more discussion about the future of the U.S.-China relationship. I'm Olivia Young, and I'll bring you insight from prominent Columbia University professor Adam Tooze, who offers insight into how China is settling into a role as a global leader.
This is DW News, and these are our top stories. NATO leaders meeting in the Netherlands agreed to defense 5% of GDP by 2035. Donald Trump called it a monumental win for the U.S. On the summit sidelines, he met with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. Trump said the talk could not have been nicer. The director of the CIA has released a statement saying credible intelligence indicates recent U.S. strikes severely damaged Iran's nuclear program. This comes after U.S. President Donald Trump insisted that the strike had resulted in, quote, the total obliteration of Iran's nuclear capabilities. Trump was responding in turn to the leak of an early Pentagon intelligence assessment that suggested the attacks may have set back Iran's nuclear program by only a matter of months. In Kenya, at least 8 people have been killed in nationwide protests against police brutality and government corruption. Hundreds more were injured. Demonstrators were marking the first anniversary of anti-tax protests that killed at least 60 people. This is DW News from Berlin. You'll find a lot more online at dw.com.
Soldiers were killed in a series of coordinated attacks by armed gunmen in 3 army bases in northern Nigeria, security sources and local officials confirmed on Wednesday. The attack, which took place on Tuesday, targeted forward operating bases in Kona, Mariga, and Baka in Niger State, as well as another base in neighboring Kaduna State. According to security officials, the gunmen engaged troops in prolonged firefight that lasted several hours. The assailants, commonly referred to as bandits in the region, are part of heavily armed criminal groups known for terrorizing northwestern Nigeria. They have been blamed for frequent abductions, attacks in villages, and assault on security installations. Local authorities say the gunmen arrived in large numbers and were well coordinated, overwhelming military personnel at the remote posts. Niger State and much of the Northwest have suffered years of insecurity with limited state presence and frequent attacks by both criminal gangs and Islamist militants.
Edgar Lungu's family expressed their disapproval after a South African court halted the former Zambian president's private burial on Wednesday. The court order was issued after a request by the Zambian government, the latest turn in a battle over the details of Lungu's funeral.
This is an opportunity for us to tell a story, a great story of President Edgar Lungu, how that he lived as a president, served the nation as a president, and thereafter he was a person that was betrayed by the system, cast aside by the system, and now in his death they wish to come back and pretend as though they took care of him, pretend as though they were good to him.
Edgar Lungu died on June 5th in South Africa, 4 years after leaving power. His family rejected plans for a state funeral in Zambia due to his feud with the country's current leader, Hakainde Hichilema.
President Hakainde Hichilema is incapable of giving President Edgar Lungu a dignified send-off. It will be a mockery. It will be a mockery. The insistence of him having to body view. As a matter of fact, interestingly enough, today a strange question came from the judge to say, suppose the president wanted to view the body. Would that be acceptable? And obviously the answer is no. Only the family will have access between now and the time that the matter is determined.
Zambia's Attorney General had approached the Pretoria High Court to stop Wednesday's private funeral. Lungu's family and the Zambian government have agreed not to go ahead with the burial until the next hearing on August 4th. Ugandan-born Zoran Mamdani declared victory in New York City's Democratic mayoral primary on Tuesday night. The 33-year-old Democratic Socialist was virtually unknown when the race began, but he defeated former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. Mamdani energized young voters with his optimistic campaign centered on the cost of living.
Tonight, we made history. In the words of Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it is done. My friends, we have done it. I will be your Democratic nominee.
Zoran Mamdani has been a member of the New York State Assembly since 2021. He is part of a new generation of progressive Democrats. Tuesday's primary exposed the party's ideological divide. Voters rejected moderate candidate Andrew Cuomo, a household name who was attempting a comeback after a sexual harassment scandal. If elected, Mamdani would become New York's first Muslim and first Indian-American mayor. He will face incumbent Eric Adams and Republican Curtis Cleaver in the November election. United States President Donald Trump said on Wednesday that American and Iranian officials will talk next week as the fragile ceasefire between Iran and Israel is currently holding. Trump told reporters at the NATO summit that he was not interested in reopening negotiations on Iran's nuclear ambitions. The US president helped broker the ceasefire that took effect on Tuesday.
But you're in no rush, is that right? So the door's open.
I'll tell you what, look, we're going to talk to them next week with Iran. We may sign an agreement, I don't know. To me, I don't think it's that necessary. I mean, they had a war, they fought, now they're going back to their world. I don't care if I have an agreement or not.
Trump insisted that US strikes had destroyed Iran's nuclear program. The United Nations nuclear watchdog said several sites in Iran had suffered extensive damage.
The only thing we'd be asking for is what we were asking for before about we want no nuclear, but we destroyed the nuclear. In other words, that's destroyed. I said, Iran will not have nuclear. Well, we blew it up. It's blown up. The kingdom come. And so I don't feel very strongly about it. We got a document, wouldn't be bad. We're going to meet with them, actually. We're going to meet with them.
Iran has insisted it will not give up its nuclear program. The country's president, Masoud Pezeshkian, announced on Tuesday the end of what he called the 12-day war and claimed victory. Iran has not acknowledged any coming talks with the US.
Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. That's the nation. Tuesday. People.
Actually, we love you. News.com forward also there, to each other, and also to the presenters like GB.com /yours, because GB News is your channel.
The first YouGov voting intention poll since the 2024 election shows a
monument ritual victory, but it's a monumental win for the United States because we were carrying much more than our fair share.
And trails a great victory as NATO leads boost defence spending, committing to 5% of GDP by 2035.
Director of the CIA has backed President Trump's view that the US strikes on Iran's nuclear sites caused severe damage. Last night, a leaked report claiming the impact was minimal.
We're going to be selling 2 years of the modern railway and we'll be live from Paddington.
As for lower requirement, the VAT rate tested asking before.
And morning when beat the Netherlands yesterday, they 71 close final. Who's that? Okay, I apologise. 15 years old. Emma. Quite. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much for giving time to Amish Shackle 5858. I am Amish Shackle. Have a good life. Bye-bye.